Hey, what's up everyone? Johnny the Geek here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to download and install VirtualBox, the latest version, as well as Windows 8, the consumer preview. Right, so this is a little bit different from a previous video that I had where I show you how to install VirtualBox and Windows 8, the developers preview. So Windows just announced or just released this consumer preview. It's supposed to have, I don't know, some more support or more tricks and tips and stuff like that. I don't know, there's something more about it. But anyways, for those of you who want to install this on a VirtualBox, I'm now going to show you how to do that. Right, so first things first, what I usually like to do, since this takes the longest, is download Windows 8. And so I'm here at the downloads page for the ISOs. And there's two different ways they do it now. The first is that if you hit this button here, it actually downloads some installer, and then it checks your system, and then it actually wants to try to install it on top of your Windows, right? We don't want that. Instead, there's a tiny little button here that says ISO format, and it takes you to this page to download the ISO. So we have our two choices here of 64-bit and 32-bit. I'm going to go ahead and do the 64-bit, but I would suggest, if you don't have a very powerful system, to do the 32-bit instead. So if you have like one, or actually you should have more than 1 gig for this, but if you have like 2 gigs of RAM, then use a 32-bit, because you can allocate 1 gig of your RAM to the 32-bit. If you have 4 gigs of RAM or more, you can allocate 2 gigs of RAM to the 64-bit. So I have a fairly powerful machine, so I'm going to go ahead and download the 64-bit version here. So I just clicked on it. It's going to download. It's going to take a very long time. So I've already downloaded it. Actually, it's on my desktop. But just go ahead and choose one or the other, and then the product key here, you're going to want to copy this, right? And we will go ahead and paste it in a notepad, and we'll save that for later once we get to the install portion. Alright, so next we're going to download VirtualBox. So I'm on the downloads page here, and I've clicked on the VirtualBox 4.1.8 for Windows host, x86 AMD version here, right? So through the magic of television, I've already downloaded the two. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on VirtualBox here to initiate the installation process. I apologize if this is boring and mundane, doing an installation portion of this. But I don't want to edit, so I double click on it, clicked on next, and then all of these settings here you can leave alone. You can leave those if you want. I don't like it in my quick launch bar. Create a shortcut on the desktop, sure, why not? Okay, so this warning is basically saying, hey, it's gonna install a network card, right? It's gonna be a virtualized network card. It tricks your Windows into thinking you just installed a physical network card, right? But it's actually going to be a virtual one. So go ahead and click on yes. By the way, it's temporarily disconnecting you from the network, right? Just for a quick minute. You don't have to do anything. It just does it automatically on its own, right? So I clicked installed there, and I have both 32-bit and 64-bit versions here, right? So we're just going to let VirtualBox install here, and yeah. So some people have tried to actually install this onto a thumb drive, and maybe I'll also do that. I'll install the 64-bit version first onto my hard drive here, onto my computer, but then I'll try to install the 32-bit onto a thumb drive, for those of you who don't have a whole lot of space to allocate on your local machine. You can try doing it onto the thumb drive, but it's a little tricky. Right, so VirtualBox is finished installing, and yeah, we're going to go ahead and start it up. And so it started up here. Let's see. Oh, pay no attention to this. I had a previous install of Windows 8. I tried all this out before just to make sure things work. So yours would actually look like this. Right. So we just started up VirtualBox. We want to create a new machine. So we'll just click on new there. Then we're going to type in Windows 8, and it actually has already some little preset here. And I'm going to do Windows 8 64-bit. Not that it really matters. This is just for, I don't know, labeling purposes. Alright, so the amount of memory I'm going to allocate to 64-bit Windows 8 is 2 gigs. Although they do recommend 1536. But I'm going to allocate 2 gigs. Right, so I'm going to create a new disk. And the VirtualBox disk image, this is basically that file, that virtual file that they create, and this is most compatible with VirtualBox, obviously, because it's with it's made by VirtualBox, but they also give you other options here: virtual machine disk, virtual hard disk, and HDD parallels hard disk. These are other softwares, so if you have other software on your machine here, this will be compatible with that. But then also VirtualBox is kind of saying, hey, we're also compatible with these other images, these other types. So this is like VMware, a really popular program. Parallels is a really popular program. I don't know what VHD is, but this is going to be the only program I use, so I'm going to leave it at VDI. Alright, so then dynamically allocated and fixed size explanations here. Basically, it will only use what you take up. So even though you allocate 20 gigs, right, the install is like 3 gigs, so it'll only take up 3 gigs on your hard drive. So as you install programs and apps, it grows, so does that file. Right? If it was fixed, then you say 20 gigs, then you'll see that that image file is going to be 20 gigs large. And we'll take a look at that file that it creates, just for showing you what I'm talking about. Alright, so next, this is where you allocate how much size, and 20 gigs is fine for this. I'm not going to install a whole lot of programs on there, but you can increase it to how much you want. And then also you can choose where you want it to go. So right now, by default, it goes into my profile folder here, into VirtualBox VMs, and then into a folder called Windows 8 that it made, and that's fine. It's a good spot. And so you would only want to allocate a lot more if you plan on actually installing a bunch of programs into this virtualized Windows 8. I'm not, so I'm going to leave it at 20 gigs, which is fine. Alright, so it just gives you a rundown of what you just selected here. Click on create again, and voila, we have our system, and we're pretty much ready to go. We could start this if we wanted to, but we actually have to change some things first. So we'll go to the settings here, right? So first things first, all of these you want to leave alone. System, we're going to change the boot order. I'm going to remove floppy and move it down. The first boot order is a CD-ROM drive, which is fine. All of this stuff, leave it alone. Processor, I have a quad-core processor, right? So I'm going to go ahead and allocate 2 CPUs to it. If you only have a dual-core, and I suggest that you have at least a dual-core processor for this. But if you only have a single core, obviously you're going to leave it at single core. If you have a dual core, leave it as single core, right? And this really only comes into play is if you're running your virtual machine and you're doing other stuff in your native Windows machine, right? And then you can allocate, tell it, okay, out of the 2 cores, how much of the 2 cores you want to use. You want to use 100% of those 2 cores. This is where you would allocate it. You could say, hey, never use more than 90% of those 2 CPUs that I'm giving you, right? But that's just up to you. Right, so hardware acceleration, for those of you who have CPUs that are virtualized capable, or they have support virtualized technology, this is where you would enable that. Apparently, I guess in this newer version of VirtualBox, you may not have to necessarily have a CPU that has virtualization technology, right? And you might be able to still install some operating systems, but from what I was hearing from another YouTube person, they said that they couldn't install Windows 8 and they didn't have a CPU that supported virtualized technology. So all that's kind of complicated. I'm not going to get into that, so we'll move on to the display. And I like to allocate a lot of memory, as much memory as I can. 256. Enable 3D acceleration, 2D acceleration. If you have integrated graphics, don't do this, but I can't really say what your experience is going to be in Windows 8 because everything Windows 7 and beyond requires some eye candy or some graphics processing. Alright, so that's it for that. Now, storage. Here's where it gets a little tricky. It's given us one optical drive here, right? And we are going to click on this, and then we're going to click on this little disk here. And we're going to choose the virtual CD DVD disk file, right? And that's our ISO files that we have right up here, right? So once you click on choose a virtual CD disk file, brings up our open window here, and on my desktop I have the consumer preview 64-bit. So we'll click on that, click on open, and then it's just giving you information as what you just did right here. You just chose this file here, and this is our hard drive. This is what the machine thinks our physical hard drive is at, right? So we leave that alone. We don't do anything with that. All right, on to the next thing. Audio, only enable audio, leave that alone. Network, I usually like to run it as bridged adapter, right, for one adapter. So basically the virtual machine that you're creating, it asks the internet for an IP address, so the network thinks that your virtual machine is its own machine, so it gets its own IP address and it's part of the network as a whole separate machine, even though you're connected to one machine physically. So that's one of the benefits, but you don't have to do this. It's if you don't plan on doing any kind of networking type stuff, so you can leave that as NAT if you wanted to. Serial ports I leave alone. USB controller. Here's the tricky part with the whole installing this to a USB thumb drive. Let's see here. If you click that, you need some VirtualBox extension pack. I'm not gonna get that, so I'll leave that unchecked. But actually back here, this is where I think you would choose where no, never mind. I think back when you first set it up, instead of choosing where you want to have your VirtualBox, remember in my, let's see here, in this folder here, VirtualBox VMs, Windows 8 stuff, that earlier section, rewind and watch it, you would choose your thumb drive, right? And make sure that your thumb drive is NTFS formatted and not FAT32. It has to be NTFS formatted if you're going to store your virtual boxes on a thumb drive and run it off of your thumb drive, right? Because these files here get to be very large, and if it's a FAT32 thumb drive, which most thumb drives are formatted in FAT32, it's going to be large. So a FAT32 thumb drive cannot store a file larger than 4 gigs. So your disk image here is going to be way bigger than 4 gigs, right? The single file. It can't store, even though you have a 16 gig whatever thumb drive, it can't store a single file. Just a one file can't be larger than 4 gigs. You could have 4, 5, 10, 12 gigs of a bunch of little files, but little files that are like 100 megabytes, 200 megabytes here and there, whatever. Yeah, so that's the whole thumb drive issue that some people have been telling me about, that they wouldn't be able to install onto a thumb drive, right? Alright, moving on. Sorry for the side note there. Moving on, USB stuff, shared folders. I guess you can specify a folder on the desktop. So if I made this folder here, shared, right, on my desktop. Alright. In my virtual machine, I'll have a folder on the desktop too called shared or something, and whatever it is I put in that folder in my virtual machine in my Windows 8 should end up in that folder on the desktop, in that folder over there on the desktop. Alright, but you'll have to play around with that. I'm not sure how that works. Okay, we are ready, so I'm just gonna click on start, and it's gonna boot up, and it's going to read the ISO image file right there, right? And so that is Windows 8 consumer preview logo, so it's loading up here. And so this is pretty much a standard affair. Click on next, click on install now. Starts off pretty much just like Windows 7 installation. Oh, okay, so here is our key that we gotta install. DNJXJ7XBW8 2378T X22TX BKG7J. Right, sorry for making you go through that. Like I said, I'm not gonna edit this. Click on next. I'm gonna go do a custom, and then there's that 20 gigs hard drive that we created. We're gonna format this. Click on new, apply, okay. Alright, so I created this boot partition here, but we're gonna install on the partition too. So just make sure that's highlighted and click on next. And now we play the waiting game. So this is gonna take good 20 to 30 minutes depending on how quick your system is. I'm gonna go ahead and pause this recording, and I'll come back as soon as this is done. Alright, so the Windows 7 or Windows 8 consumer preview just finished installing. It restarted on its own automatically, and so this is the whole startup process. And basically you're gonna go through the whole filling out your own info. If you've gotten this far with no problems, you're golden, everything's good. I will probably make another video on some of the stuff that I like, don't like. I really haven't gotten a whole lot of experience or time with this Windows 8 version, but I actually, if I like it, I'm actually going to try running this as my machine because I want to install software. They say that you can install a lot of the software that works on Windows 7 will work on this Windows 8, which is cool. So I'm going to install all the software that I use, the Adobe stuff, Word, Office stuff, all that programs, and I actually use it as my main machine, right? So just to see if there's compatibility issues or anything like that. And so be on the lookout for that whole process. That'll probably be the next video, where I show how to install it straight directly onto a PC, with all the drivers and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed the videos. Please comment, rate, thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever. Subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching. Catch you later.